Welcome viewers to this very special video today, where you join us for a highlights video covering every single race from rounds 1 and 2 of the 2025 season. Round 1 of the season took place on the 8th of February at Daytona Sandown Park, and this was also the opening round of the Southern Championships, and then round 2 of the season took place at Warden on Sunday the 23rd of February, and this was the opening round of the brand new Northern Senior Championships. Round 1 saw a record D-Max attendance of 43 drivers spread across 2 sold-out splits. Split 2 were the first group to take to the circuit with their one-shot qualifying session, and it was Gabriel Norse who put it on pole position with just over a third of a second ahead of Adam Thompson. Adam sadly spun though as he went into turn 1 on lap 1 of the race, putting himself into the barrows and unfortunately dropping him to the back of the field, but Gabriel Norse had no such problems as he blitzed the field, setting the fastest lap of the race by 1.2 seconds as he won the race by nearly 12 seconds ahead of Raj Kula. Raj meanwhile just about beat her close friend Stuart Whiten as she came home as the top lightweight driver in P2 overall, and it's Stuart Whiten who came home as the top super heavyweight driver in P3, and it was Henry Walter, the fiance of Raj Kula, he came home in a close P4. This race was the first time that a lot of drivers had driven a D-Max kart in the wet, and in fact it was the first time that a lot of drivers had driven a two-stroke kart end of, and the first time that a lot of drivers have ever driven in the wet before, courtesy of a lot of the drivers for this season being new to outdoor karting. As you can see on screen, that resulted in quite a few spinners over the course of the race. In fact, there was 12 caught directly on camera as the field spread out over the course of the 12-minute race. Gabriel Norse's victory though clinched in promotion to Split 1, and this is a brief snippet of what he had to say after the race.
Gabriel, you didn't want an interview earlier on. How are you feeling now?
I'm feeling really good now. I just led from the first lap, and built up I think a 12-second gap in the end.
Split 1 then took to the circuit for their opening race of the day, and this was an absolutely incredible race that will go down for the ages. Archie Bullard put it on pole position in the Split 1 one-shot qualifying session, just about beating Charlie Foster. Those two were the fastest drivers by a distance in the one-shot quali, and the only drivers to get down into the 59s. Charlie and Archie then battled for the lead throughout the race before it came to a crescendo with 2 minutes to go as the two of them went side by side heading down to turn 6, and Archie unfortunately spun out. This allowed both Charlie and Jack Redfern to get through, and Jack challenged for the victory until the end, but it's Charlie Foster who ended up taking the victory by just under a second ahead of Archie Bullard, who got back past Jack Redfern in the dying moments of the race, and Jack Redfern came home in a close P3. William Tiddenham meanwhile finished as the top senior driver in the race, coming home in P4 after recovering through the field after a poor start, and it's Carlos Amanis who came home as the top lightweight driver as he came home in P5. This victory was only Charlie's second ever victory in the EKS, and we can hear what he had to say after the race.
Charlie Foster, that race was quite stressful. How does it feel to be a winner in the first round of EKS?
Well, it was very good. The start of the race, I should say, me and Archie were even on pace, and then he tried trying to take better lines, which were like not drying up, but they were. And half through the race, I was like 5 cars back. There was a gap, just went for it. It was clean. But then I had to give him some room, racing. We had some good battle, and then another opportunity is I sent him. He had a better run, but then it was 50%, so I still had my nose in. Yeah, I won.
Split 2 then retook to the circuit for their second race of the day, and it's Raj Kula who led from start to finish as she took what is only the second ever victory for a female in EKS history. She also took the fastest lap of the race as she beat Carl Gaffney by 6.6 seconds, while Stuart Whiting came home again in P3 ahead of Charlie Jackson, and it's Morgan Turk-Sommer-Davija who recovered from his race 1 spins to finish up in P5. This victory gained Raj promotion to Split 1 for the first time, and we can hear what she had to say after the race.
Raj, winning from the front, are you excited for your promotion to Split 1?
Very excited, yeah. I mean, it was very plain sailing, so more of the same, please.
Split 1 then retook to the circuit for their second race of the day, and it was Archie Bullard who led from start to finish to end up taking the victory again ahead of Charlie Foster. Charlie went in deep into turn 1 on lap 1 of the race, and that dropped him down to P5, but Charlie did a great job of recovering back through the field to finish in P2, just under 3 seconds behind Archie Bullard at the finish, and it's Jack Redfern who ended up coming home again in P3. William Tidnam had a much better start to this race and at one point was running up in P3. He ended up coming home in P4, but that was after having a last lap battle for 4th position with Lukanik. That is a battle to finish as the top senior driver in this race. It's William though who came out on top just ahead of Lukanik. It's William who came home as the top heavyweight driver and Luka who came home as the top lightweight driver. And it's Ryan Sandown who finished up in P6. This is a driver who's a Club 100 driver by trade, not familiar with D-Max karts or the Daytona circuits. He did a great job finishing up in P6, and it's Callum Bendlow who finished just behind him with a great drive to finish in 7th position. Carlos Samanes crossed the finish line in 8th position, but he unfortunately received a 30-second penalty after the race for taking out Alfie Shrub in the early stages of the race. This dropped Alfie to the back of the field, and once the penalty was applied, Carlos Samanes was also dropped down to the back of the field. Gabriel Norse, meanwhile, showed that he belongs in Split 1 as he went from the back of the grid to finish up in P13, and that was after he had a 5-second penalty applied for forcing Andres Dimitriadis off the circuit as they headed down to turn 6 with a few minutes left of the race. This is what Archie Bullard had to say after the race.
How was that race?
Yeah, it was amazing. I had the pace and I drove away with it, really. Quite simple as that.
Split 2 then retook to the circuit for their final race of the day, and Adam Thompson made amends for his spins in the earlier races to win this race in dominant fashion, leading from the start to the end of the race and setting the fastest lap of the race in the process. He came across the line nearly 6 seconds ahead of Charlie Jackson. That's a very impressive drive from Charlie Jackson, bearing in mind that he's still in the process of making the transition from indoor to outdoor karting. Barney Williams, meanwhile, led a whole train of karts across the finish line as he came home in P3 just ahead of Adam Barras, Stuart Whiten and Carl Gaffney. Carl Gaffney had been on course to finish in 3rd place at one point, but unfortunately a late race spin dropped him down to P6. And it's Archie Prattley who ended up coming home in P7 as he showed a real turn of pace in this final race of the day, going 2 seconds quicker than he'd gone in the previous races. He came home in P7, and it's Henry Walter who unfortunately finished in P8 after forcing Adam Barras off the circuit earlier on in the race and receiving a 5-second penalty. Morgan Turk Summer-Davija, meanwhile, had been running up in P4 in the early laps of the race, but a spin on the end of lap number 3 resulted in him getting stuck in the barriers, which meant that he finished down in P16 at the end of the race. And his mentor, Chrissy Harding, had a similar race where she started out multiple times, and unfortunately she finished behind him in 17th. This is what Adam Thompson had to say after the race.
How was that race?
Well, it went really well. I had an excellent start. Straight out there, I got a good launch off of the lights and just led from there, really. Consistent laps, no spinning this time. And that brought it home, really.
Split 1 then retook to the circuit for the final race of the day, and it's Archie Bullard who dominated this race, leading again from the start to the finish of the race, this time winning by just over 3 seconds ahead of Charlie Foster, who had a race-long battle with Jack Redfern for P2, with Charlie just about coming out on top at the end of the race. Ryan Sandown, meanwhile, impressed once more, as this time he finished as the top senior driver, coming home in P4 after battling with Lukanik throughout the race to finish as the top senior driver. Ryan came home in 4th place, just a second ahead of Luca, who was the top lightweight driver in the race. William Tidnam, meanwhile, he finished in P6 for the first time, being beaten within the senior classes, and Gabriel Norse proves once more that Split 1 is where he belongs as he came home in P7, a very impressive drive for a driver who started off the day racing in Split 2. Carlos Samanes, meanwhile, had an incident with Julius Stankowiak early on in the race, which resulted in Carlos hitting a puddle, and unfortunately it did cause his kart to break down. He was reinstated back into position though afterwards, and he finished in 8th position. Julio, meanwhile, had an exhaust problem later on in the race, and well, you can hear from this what it sounded like. Sounds pretty good if you ask me. This is what Jack Redfern had to say after the final race.
How was that drive for you?
It was difficult because of the wet conditions. I mean, I was right behind Charlie, tried to get past, couldn't find a gap. But these karts are hard in the wet, hard to control, but it was good fun. Can't wait for the next round.
All of this meant that Archie took the overall victory within the junior class, coming out 3 points ahead of Charlie Foster at the end of the day, and it's Jack Redfern who finished third in every race and as a result finished third in the overall results. Frederick Burden impressed on his EKS debut to finish up in P4, and Alfie Sharp had a very unlucky day, being involved in incidents in both race 2 and race 3. He still managed to finish though in 5th place in the overall results, ahead of debutant Oliver Coe in 6th place. Luke Nick meanwhile finished on top in the senior lightweight class, repeating his overall victory from round 6 here at Sandown Park last year. He came out on top ahead of Callum Bendelow, who took home his first ever podium in the EKS at his 17th attempt, so that was a very impressive feat for Callum. Carlos Manis took the final spot on the podium as he came home in P3 overall, with Louis Draper finishing up in P4, impressing once more after having a very strong second half of last season, and Tom Hughes finished up in P5 on his EKS debut ahead of James King in 6th. William Tidden meanwhile held on to the overall victory as he won outright in the heavyweight class ahead of the ever improving Ryan Sandown, and it's Gabriel Norse who made history as the first split 2 driver to finish on the overall podium as he came home in P3. Ross Samuel had a strong day as he came home 4th overall ahead of Ashley Mason King. This was Ashley's first time racing at Sandown Park, and Samuel Bennett put in a strong performance to come home in 6th place ahead of Stuart Whitoon, who was the top senior heavyweight driver as he finished 7th overall in the heavyweight class. Adam Prosser meanwhile was awarded with a brand new Karting Armature Experts Driver of the Day award. He was awarded it for his strong performances considering his lack of experience. 2 weeks later, and we headed 5 hours north to the northeast of England as the series made its debut at Warden Law. This was also the first ever round of the Northern Senior Championships, and this saw a record senior attendance of 43 drivers. Junaid Jones put in a stunning lap in the lightweight one-shot qualifying session, but it's Barry Lakes who led from turn 1 onwards in race 1, dominating the race, and he ended up coming home in first position 5 seconds ahead of the drivers behind. There was all manner of chaos behind him as 3 drivers spun out of second position in quick succession of one another, and all 3 of those drivers spun out at turn 3. Matthew Clark was one of those drivers. He dropped down to P5 temporarily, but he ended up recovering back to P2 at the finish as he showed superb pace on his EKS debut. And it's Tom Shipman, another one of the drivers who spun going through turn 3. He ended up recovering to P3 as he almost set the fastest lap of the race in the process. Freddie Winskell meanwhile kept it on the straight and narrow, and he finished in P4 as a result, and Lewis Blanche spun out of second position in the dying laps of the race. That as a result dropped him down to P5. He ended up coming home ahead of Hassan Zafar, and Lewis Ashthorpe had a great drive through the field as he capitalised on a spin from Lewis Jolly with 7 minutes left of the race. That allowed him to get past both Lewis Jolly and Raj Kula, so it's Lewis Ashthorpe who came home in P7 ahead of Raj Kula in 8th, and it's Lewis Jolly who dropped down to 9th courtesy of his spin. We can now hear what race winner Barry Lakes had to say after the race. So how did that go from your perspective?
Yeah, cheers. It was a good start. Managed to get in the lead literally on the first turn, and just had a decent kart, so managed to keep it there. Kept it obviously on the dark stuff. Didn't spin, which is ultimately quite important in these conditions. And yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it actually. Really enjoyed it.
Hayden Harris then blitzed the field in the heavyweight one-shot qualifying session as he put it on pole position by more than 1.5 seconds ahead of Alex Haig, but Alex very much did keep up with Hayden Harris in the first heavyweight race of the day. Those who battled out throughout the race unfortunately neither had an onboard camera, but it is Hayden Harris who got past Alex Haig at the final corner of the final lap of the race as the two of them navigated lap traffic. Hayden ended up coming across the finish line 7/10 ahead of Alex Haig, and it's Ashley Mason King who on his first ever visit to Warden Law did a very good job coming home in P3. There was a huge battle for P4, and it's John Paragon who ended up coming home in 4th position, just ahead of one of his teammates, Kyle Simmons, and it's Simon Fulton who came home in P6, just ahead of Ian Wilson. Charlie Jackson meanwhile put in an impressive performance on his first visit to Warden Law, coming home in P8, and Anthony Deverell finished just 4 seconds off of 4th place as he came home in 9th. This is what the top two had to say after the race.
Well, kind of just drove at each other all race and ended up next to each other all race. It was just kind of a bit of back and forth throughout the middle of the race, but I mean, at the furthest stint in the race, he was just so much faster than me. Like, I mean, until I figured out sector 3, you were just gapping me, but then I think oh, sorry.
I think during the race, it was like kind of top and turn really.
Yeah.
Like he was quicker in some sections, I was quicker in others, and then I made a couple of mistakes which got him past, and then I got a bit lucky as well.
The lightweight drivers then returned to the circuit for their second and final race of the day, and this time it was Tom Shipman who blitzed the field as he led from the start of the race to the end of the race, beating Barry Lakes by just over 3 seconds at the finish line. Barry put in another great drive though to finish in P2, setting very consistent lap times and setting the fastest lap of the race again in this race. And it's Matthew Clark who showed great pace once more to come home in P3 ahead of Freddie Winskell, who again finished in P4. Hassan Safar and Lewis Ashforth had an incident on the very final corner of the final lap of the race, and Hassan ended up finishing in P5 as Lewis Ashforth let him back past at the finish line, and Lewis Jolly almost capitalised on the incident to get past the two of them. He just about fell short though as he crossed the finish line, half a tenth behind Lewis Ashforth. This is what the race winner Tom Shipman had to say after the race.
Thank you. It was a bit dicey at the start. There was a little bit of contact, which whoever was in second place at the time gave me the position back, and I believe that was the only reason why I managed to get that little bit of a gap. They seemed to battle behind us, but I was keeping an eye on the guys behind us, but we managed to give us that confidence. Maybe a little bit of track limits was used, but managed to take the win.
The heavyweight drivers then returned to the circuit for their final race of the day, and this time it was Alex Haig who was starting on pole position, courtesy of setting the fastest lap of the race in the first heavyweight race of the day. But Hayden Harris dominated this race from start to finish as he set the outright fastest lap of the day, and he won the race by nearly 13 seconds ahead of Alex Haig at the finish. Ashley Mason-King put in another strong drive to finish in P3, and it's John Paragon who again finished in P4, this time though with a large margin to the cars behind. Ross Samuel struggled in race 1, but he made amends for it in race 2 as he finished up in P5 ahead of Anthony Deverill and Simon Fulton, while Xiaofeng Yang finished in P8. Ian Wilson then came home in P9, but he sadly received a 30-second penalty for taking out Kyle Simmons in the early stages of the race, and that dropped Ian Wilson all the way down to P16. I spoke to Ross Samuel after the race about how his day went.
Yeah, no, very well. I mean, the first race was a bit of a one to forget, but second race was good. Got a good start and just kind of stayed there, really. Kept it consistent, and that's about it.
Barry Lakes' first and second place finishes meant that he won overall in the lightweight class as he beat Tom Shipman by 2 points, and Matthew Clark took home the final spot on the overall podium as he finished in P3. Freddie Winskell finished 4th in both races, which logically puts him in 4th place overall, and Hassan Zafar had 2 P5s to finish in 5th overall. And there was then 4 Lewises taking up the following 4 positions. That is Lewis Ashforth, who beat Lewis Jolly, who beat Lewis Blench, who beat Lewis Middleton, and it's Chris Phillips who then ended up rounding out the overall top 10. Over in the heavyweight class, Hayden Harris's 2 race victories meant that he won the event overall, taking home the top step of the podium on a very, very impressive EKS debut for him. Alex Haig, meanwhile, similarly impressed on his debut as his 2 P2s meant that he finished 2nd overall. Ashley Mason-King is a 2-stroke driver by trade, but he showed that he could be quick in 4 strokes too as he took home the final spot on the overall podium. John Paragon, meanwhile, impressed to finish 4th in both races and finished 4th overall, while Simon Fulton finished up in P5 alongside his teammate Anthony Deverill. Kyle Simmons tied on points with Anthony, but it's Anthony who took home P6 courtesy of having a faster lap time, and it's Charlie Jackson who finished in P8 just ahead of his rival Ross Samuel, with Xiaofeng Yang in P10. Adam Thompson then came home in P11 as he beat Ian Wilson, who had been hoping for a much higher finish. His 30-second penalty unfortunately cost him dearly. Janae Jones, meanwhile, was awarded with the Karting Armchair Experts Driver of the Day award. This was for his strong pace that he showed, including putting it on pole position in the lightweight qualifying session. He unfortunately had bad luck during the event, but he was awarded for his strong showing. The just want to say a big thank you to everyone who took part in the opening rounds of this season. Our next event is at Daytona Tamworth, where all of the championships will be running at once. There are 65 drivers already booked into this. I look forward to seeing you all then on Saturday, the 5th of April.